Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And we're doing another tier list today. We were going to keep going with Console Wars. And then I had this idea for a tier list, and I got very excited. And Tyler loves tier lists too, and we're doing it.
Yeah. What's the tier list, Mike? People already know because they saw the title in their podcast app.
What if I don't put it in the title? What if I name the title something else?
I think you got to put it in.
Yeah, that's just good podcasting to put in the title. Okay, so It is the tier list for controllers.
Our favorite and least favorite controllers. And boy, are there some good ones, and boy, are there some stinkers.
There are some real stinkers on this list, and I'm excited to talk about it. And before we do this, we're going to try our best to take this from a very, practical angle. Like, if the controller was not fun to play with, it's going to go down. It's bad.
Yeah.
But
we're also going with ones that we have experience with because, I can look at all kinds of terrible controllers that came out for different consoles, and but I never used it, so I don't know if it was bad.
That's a good point. Also, systems like the Atari 2600 had 5 or 6 controllers, depending on the game, and we're not covering that because that's just too many.
And novelty controllers like the Power Glove is not good. That's an F tier already. I can tell you that much.
Super Scope. We don't have the Super Scope on here.
We're not talking these are mainline normal controllers for each system.
The one you get when you purchase the console.
That's right.
Except
or
for Atari.
In the case for a couple of them, then we might do some not add-ons, but it'll make sense when we talk about them. Okay, which one are we doing first, Mike?
I think we should just start with the first part on the list. Very classic.
Okay.
The Nintendo Entertainment System controller. So we're talking the square with the 2 buttons and the D-pad and start select. That's all you got. What do you think, Tyler? Go.
Well, let me put it in the old the video thing here. I need to post the video. I never posted the video version of the last tier list we did.
Well, we can post it as a treat.
There you go. Okay, so let me make it the right size here. An original NES controller. Well, it does get some points for being sort of the blueprint by which all controllers after it would be. Controllers before and after the NES are not the same, right? They were joysticks before you had the pad, the NES pad. However, it's not comfortable. It's not fun to play with. It's terrible.
Not, yeah. So in that sense, if we're going to say that it is the baseline for controllers, I think we should give it a D or a C.
Yeah. Okay. Is it a D or I'm going to give it a D, and I'll tell you why. This is what I think, and we can discuss. But I think it's a D, and the reason I think it's a D for the original NES controller is because there was a remade version of that controller with the NES, the top loader NES. I'll Google an image of it so we can show people who are watching the video. It's called the Dogbone NES controller. And it looks like a Super Nintendo controller for the NES. Have you ever seen this controller?
No.
Well, Google Dogbone NES controller, my friend, and that is the C tier. That's what I think.
Oh yeah, this looks weird. This looks.
But it looks better, right?
It's better than the original, but it is weird because it's trying to be an SNES. It's also, it does look like a dog bone. They're not wrong.
It does, yeah. It looks like a dog bone, and it is kind of trying to be a Super Nintendo controller, but there's only 2 buttons. The select and start are the slanted kind that are on the Game Boy or on the Super Nintendo controller. It does have the good D-pad. The NES does have it's the same D-pad they've used for years. They used it up until, I guess they only really changed it for the DS, right? Once they moved into the DS Lite, that D-pad is kind of what the Wii used as well. And from there on out, it was kind of that D-pad, which is still a good D-pad too. But the NES one was the same one they used for Super Nintendo. That was on the N64 controller, was on the GameCube controller, was on all the Game Boys. So yeah, I think D tier for the original because it's not good. C tier for the Dogbone though.
All right. So that has been done. It is a D tier.
Yep.
C tier for the Dogbone. Before we move on, can you share with me your screen so I can see you drag and drop these icons?
Oh boy, maybe. Let me see if if Discord will do that on Mac. Yeah, here we go.
All right. There it is. There Amazing. It is. D and C for the Dogbone. Okay. Let's move on to a different company
Okay.
And we're going to go to the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 controller.
Okay.
We're putting those
going
together.
DualShock then.
Yeah, DualShock, because they're pretty much the same. Like, I know that someone's going to be like, actually, they're pretty much the same. Okay.
And we can, like, if we wanted to rank, like, the non-DualShock version separately, I don't know, drop it a tier, I guess, for the one without joysticks, because it's the same thing, but no joysticks.
That's right.
The actually on the PS2 versus PS1 controller, some people will tell you they're exactly the same. They're not. The PS2 controller has pressure-sensitive buttons that were used in like 4 games and not even very well. So,
all right,
there you go. Yeah, it's your video game history lesson on your history podcast.
I think this is also. I'm leaning B and C because it's very much a improvement on controllers before it.
Yeah.
But it's not the best. It's not the best.
I don't put it at S tier.
I don't put it at A tier. I don't think. I think
you don't
B.
even put it at A tier.
I think
you
B.
think this is B tier.
I think it's a B tier.
Okay, all right. Now, listeners of our other tier list that we did a console tier list, will know that as this goes on, we may change things around a bit as more context becomes clear and we've discussed other controllers. We may start to shuffle these around a little bit. So just because we've said it here doesn't mean it's set in stone forever in that place.
This is not Ronco. You don't set it and forget it. We'll come back to it.
That's
all
right. Okay,
moving on.
PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 controller, B tier.
Let's go to Microsoft.
Okay.
And let's talk about the Xbox. Let's first do chronological order. So we're going to start with the Duke.
The Duke. Okay.
The big old Duke. You can't say that on a podcast, I think, actually, now that I think about it.
And this image that I just pasted in is absolutely enormous.
Well, you got to get that high-res photo for the Duke.
That's right. We need the Duke to be in 8K.
Honestly, this is one of those controllers where I'm like, this is bad, but my heart tells me don't put it down, but I need to be real with myself and say this controller was bad.
Yeah, I mean, the the S, controller S, it was definitely a better controller. I think there are some people who will tell you that this is a better controller because I think it accommodates larger hands better.
That is true.
As a person with small hands, I cannot confirm.
I also don't even know what it would be like now because I played it as a child.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if it would fit my hands now. Like, if I tried it out now, if I went to my local Duke store and bought a Duke controller.
You can get a Duke for your Xbox One. Hyperkin made one.
They have the collector's edition thing.
And it's got a OLED screen in the middle, too, that I guess shows the Xbox logo. Neat.
Yeah, neat. That sounds like a waste of an LED screen.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about this controller, though, is the left joystick has a big like divot for your thumb, and the right joystick has a smaller one, like it's like a sniper scope or something.
Oh, yeah.
Different size divots, which I don't think carried through to the S controller, smaller one.
I feel bad for whoever designed the Duke. We're just sitting here poo-pooing all over it.
Yeah, well, it was not.
It was also different because if you look at that photo, you forget the black and white buttons also.
Yep.
That was left of the console.
Those,
but then the X, A, B, and Y buttons are not perfectly circular like they are. They're like ovals.
Ovally.
Which is interesting.
It's not good.
No, I think this is E or F.
Wow, okay.
Because I let my emotions get the better of me in our console episode.
I think that's what this whole thing is. It's just emotions. That's
it is emotions. Are you thinking E or F?
Let's go E for now, because there are worse ones.
E for everyone. Okay.
We need to make sure we get something in every category, though, because otherwise there's no point.
E. Okay. So that was the Duke. Do we want to talk about the S while we're here? The Xbox S controller?
Yeah, but just because they're for the same system and they're kind of trying to do the same thing. The S controller came out, a year later? It was like for the Japanese launch. They realized that this controller was far too large. I think average hand size in Japan is much smaller, and so this would be more comfortable for it. So here, let me grab this image.
Also, when I bought my Xbox, I had an S controller. I missed out on the Duke.
Yeah, I never had a Duke either. I do own a Duke now, but only because I got it on accident.
You own a Duke now?
Yeah, because I went to Goodwill a couple of years ago and I saw an original Xbox on the shelf, and it was like a launch model, and it came with the Duke. It doesn't work.
Dude,
the controller's broken. I should open it up and try to fix it.
That's really cool that you have an original Duke, though. That's really cool. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I bet you our listeners think you're very cool right now too for having that.
Oh, thanks everyone. It does seem kind of like a Dreamcast 2.0 controller, especially considering that it had 2 memory card ports in it, both like the Duke and the controller has. The Dreamcast also had 2 memory card ports.
Oh, yeah. I like in the S, they moved the black and white buttons to the bottom. And
yeah, this is just all in all much better on every metric.
That start and select were on the left. I like a start and select in the middle. I'm kind of that kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think it's a big deal, but yeah.
I'm going to say this controller, much like the PlayStation 1 controller, is a B tier.
Okay.
Because they're getting there.
Okay. Yeah, but
it's
not quite.
It's a good controller, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah. Also, take a look. It's very small on the screen, but take a look at that Duke controller and look at the D-pad. It's terrible.
What?
Have you seen? Okay, I'm going to go back to our...
Blow it up. Blow it up.
Well, it's already been shrunk, so it'll look terrible if I blow it up. Xbox Duke controller.
Don't even worry about it. I have the internet. I have the internet.
But I got to show the listeners.
Okay, you're going to show them in OBS. Okay,
here's our gigantic 8K.
Is it even a D-pad?
Look at this.
It just looks like a crater of the moon.
Yeah, it's terrible. Truly, truly awful. This D-pad. What is going on here?
It's just a circle with
like
ridges.
Kind of some. Yeah, it's got some ridges. Like this screams to me that they like really didn't want to get sued for doing some sort of D-pad ripoff.
It's
and then a lawyer was like,
crater.
guys, yeah. Some lawyer was like, guys, you're going to be okay if you do a real D-pad.
They're like, it'll be fine. No one has copyrighted a crisscross D-pad. Okay.
I think Nintendo did.
Did they? But they tried to.
Probably.
I thought they copyrighted the technology underneath it.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some technicalities as to why there's so many different kinds of D-pads and why terrible D-pads still exist. It's because when you make a D-pad, you have to come up with your own design because everybody else has theirs patented, maybe.
That's going to be a hard part about the Jaybird console when we finally get that taken off the ground, you know?
Yeah. No, we're going to use we'll use an Apple II joystick. It's like an Atari joystick, but it has like 3 buttons.
Is Apple going to come for us?
I don't think it wasn't their joystick. Whatever company made it probably doesn't exist anymore. Checkmate.
Perfect. We're playing 4D chess over here.
That's right.
Next controller. So we're comfortable with that being a B, right?
Yeah, we're comfortable with that one being a B. Knowing what's going to come later, and yes, I think I'm cool with that being B.
All right. Sega. We're getting into it. I never played the Master System, so we're skipping to Genesis because I have no experience.
It looks like, I've never played with one, but it looks like a terrible NES controller.
Well, that's good because for the Genesis controller, I'm giving it an F.
Wow. Okay, are we looking at the 6 button or the 3 button?
The 3 button. That's the kind that I had, and I'm hitting it with the F. I'm just hitting it hard with the F right now.
Wow.
Can I say these things on this podcast?
It's your podcast. Not. You can say whatever you want.
All
okay,
right.
So we're not even gonna debate it. It's got a start button.
Tyler, it's our podcast.
It's our podcast. Yeah, you're right. I think you can say that then.
Do you think it's okay for me to just take it right to the F tier?
Right to the F tier. I'm looking at it. I don't think
saying that sound way worse than they actually are. Do I need to edit that out?
No, I don't think so.
I
won't. This controller is terrible. We gotta discuss it for at least a second. I know you wanted to throw it right in the trash bin. Let's talk about why it's trash.
It's trash in the way that the NES controller was sharp corners. Genesis went the complete opposite end of it and went way too curvy. It doesn't feel comfortable in your hand. It felt weird to reach between those 3 buttons in the line because you kind of respect the diamond shape of buttons now on controllers because of this controller.
Yeah, I think you're right. This was an exercise in what not to do.
Exactly.
In terms of button layout. Because the Super Nintendo learned from this one. I want to think that the Super Nintendo learned because Super Nintendo came out after the Genesis, right?
Yeah, and they did X, Y, A, B, right? For theirs?
Yeah. They did the classic diamond layout that we all know and love now.
Were they the first to do the diamond layout?
Yeah. Maybe?
Hey, you know what? There you go, Nintendo, another first.
I think so.
So between
at least in my life.
That the buttons are bigger. I will give them a plus for making the buttons bigger.
Sure,
but because the buttons are bigger, it's harder to get between them, even more so. So this was one of my childhood consoles. So I feel like I have the experience to note, and I can say affirmatively, this controller is F tier.
This is the worst controller we have talked about thus far.
Thus far, this is the worst controller we have talked about. I'm sorry, everybody.
Okay. There is also this. I'm going to show you. This is the 6-button version, which looks even worse.
It looks so complicated.
Yeah, I'm going to put that F tier as well, just because I just
think, and that one looks more like a boomerang, honestly.
Yeah.
It looks like if you throw it at your TV, it's going to come right back at you.
Yeah, like the original PlayStation 3 controller that they showed at E3 2005.
Oh my gosh, that's a moment that have we talked about that moment yet?
I think so. I feel like we have. It would have been in Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2 probably.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's my piece about the Sega Genesis controller. I'm sorry, Genesis fans. I'm sticking to my guns here. I think this is a bad controller.
Okay. Do we want to talk about...
And I blame Tom Kalinske. I'm just kidding.
I also blame him. I think the Genesis was out before Kalinske.
Two things. The controller design, and we don't care about your personal life, Tom. Okay? Tyler said it so many times. Poor guy.
Now that I look at the Saturn controller, it looks... I don't have any experience with it, so I don't think we should rank it, but it looks a little better than the Genesis controller now that I'm looking at it.
I mean, let's say in our hearts we're giving the Saturn controller an E tier.
Yeah, just from the looks.
But we're not putting it officially on the... We're trying not to put controllers we have no direct experience with. Like, for example, when we get to the Dreamcast controller, I'm going to have no input. It's going to be all you, buddy. Okay.
I'll have input on that one. Okay. What do you want to do next? What's next?
I say we go... I don't want to do our, wild card controller that I'm highlighting on our list yet. Because it's not the generation that we're not there yet.
Yeah.
So I say we go back up and we cover the SNES.
SNES. Okay.
Which in all of the early bit generations, I'm saying the 8 and 16-bit generations, I think is the best one of those.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that. Do we rank it above the dog bone? I guess neither of us have ever used a dog bone. Or is it the same? It seems kind of the same to me.
I think it's better than the dog bone because it's got 4 buttons, right?
Yeah, I guess
it's also got shoulder buttons. It also has a flat top, so it conforms to your hand. The dog bone, it's like 2 circles. It's weird.
All right. Well, let me put the image in here so you can take a look. I mean, it's pretty similar. But you're right about the flat top. I don't know if that matters that much because you're not doing anything up there. Your fingers aren't going in that area.
I love the purple buttons on it. I like that there's purple buttons. It's cool looking.
Yeah, this is a weird version of this controller too because it looks like it has a USB-C port and 2 other buttons on top. So maybe it's this might be like the Switch version of it, but whatever, it's the same thing.
I love this controller.
Okay.
But I don't love it enough to give it S tier.
No, absolutely not.
I will give it A tier.
A tier?
Is that too much? Okay, let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
I think this is like the PlayStation controller, a formidable, it did a lot for games, right? It was undoubtedly an important controller, one of the most important controllers. How well does it hold up today? Would you use this controller today to play like a 2D side-scrolling game?
I would.
You would?
I would, but...
I guess I don't know what else I might too.
Tyler, think about this. This is the controller that you first heard Sticker Brush Symphony on.
You're right. It is.
I'm playing with your emotions now. I'm sorry. The listeners are like, man, Mike's really going for the jugular here.
Going for Sticker Brush Symphony.
I will let's leave it at B.
Okay.
Let's leave it at B. But if in your heart, I have a feeling later in your heart, you're going to want to make that A tier. You know? I'm just saying.
Okay.
And I'm definitely going to come back to it.
Okay. We'll leave it there for now.
So we have quite a few Nintendo controllers. Do we want to go through? Well, we can do those all at once. Never mind. Let's keep going. Let's do PlayStation 3.
PlayStation 3. Okay. So let me pull this up. PlayStation 3 is very similar to 1 and 2. It's
definitely an improvement.
It's definitely an improvement. I don't think the face buttons are analog. It doesn't matter. Pressure sensitive. It's wireless. That's nice.
Does not take double A's.
No, it does not. Use rechargeable batteries, and it used mini USB, which I feel like even at the time was like kind of weird. Although I don't know what else it would have used. Micro USB was not really a thing. USB-C certainly wasn't a thing in 2006. So I don't know what else they would have used.
Was this the controller that had problems with once the battery's dead, the controller's just dead? You can't replace the battery, can you?
I mean, you can take it apart and replace the battery.
You can? Okay.
Yeah, I've done it. I did it a couple of years ago on my PlayStation 3 controller.
I'm not going to knock it down for that then.
But that's not like a supported thing. I probably it's a 15-year-old controller, so I'm sure there was no warranty to void. But if there was a warranty, I probably would have voided it by replacing the battery.
Honestly, it's more of an improvement than the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 controllers. But I don't think it's enough to make it A tier. I think it's still B.
Yeah, I tend to think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. That's kind of it. It does have analog triggers. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, was it the first one to have double triggers?
Dual analog triggers? I mean, the Xbox 360. No, the original Xbox had analog triggers.
It did. Okay. But it had bumper and trigger? R1, R2, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Xbox
The
360 had RB, R1.
Yeah, but the 360 is a year older than the PlayStation 3.
That's right. So PlayStation 3 was the first to have the double bumpers.
Yeah, I think
so.
Unless you want to say
bumper,
the PS2 controller and PS1 controller had, if you're counting.
I guess the PS2 controller had it. So, I'm comfortable leaving this at a B right now.
Okay. We got a lot of B tier.
We do have a lot of B tier. But I think that's just the way it's going to be for a little bit. And then we're gonna edit it.
Yeah, we'll get into some. I know a lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for older controllers and say, older controllers are better. But I think we're gonna find as we get to newer controllers that over time, generally speaking, controllers have gotten better.
Yeah, as experimentation has gone away and we kind of have this formula of what people like, it's gonna get better and better.
Yeah, it's just been refinements.
Now, I just realized we talked about Sega Genesis, and we didn't talk about the horrendous image I'm looking at in our Discord chat that you sent me before we started the episode.
Oh, yeah, you talk about the Sega Saturn 3D controller that I think maybe only worked with Nights into Dreams. I don't really know. I've never used this controller, but I'm going to put it...
It's a Frisbee with buttons.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen for everybody. We can rank it. Even though neither of us have ever used it. Look at this. Look at it.
Who made this?
It's like if you can believe it, it's a worse Dreamcast controller.
Wow, you're right.
Which we'll get there.
I mean,
I'm F tiering it just because it's on the screen now.
Let's just poo-poo it to the F tier. We just broke our rule of we didn't use it ever, but I think everyone's comfortable with us putting that on the F tier.
Yeah, you know what? If you disagree and you really love this 3D Sega Saturn controller, okay, you're wrong.
We're going to get a picture of someone holding their disc controller for Sega Saturn, and on the other hand, they'll have a knife, and they're going to be like, I'm coming for you.
It's going to be really, really weird.
All right, let's move on then to the 1 year later after the PS3 controller. We get the Xbox 360 controller. Tyler, I kind of smell an S tier. I smell it a little bit in the air.
Sheesh.
Do you smell it? How do you feel about the smell of the Xbox 360 controller?
I don't smell it as an S tier because there are better controllers.
That is true. There are better, newer.
It's our first A tier for sure.
It's our first A tier. Let's agree to that.
This is a banger of a controller. Nobody dislikes this controller.
Batteries. Unless you're wrong. AA batteries.
AA batteries or rechargeable if you want. There's a rechargeable
Rumble.
pack.
I mean, I think all the other stuff had Rumble too. The PlayStation 3 had Rumble, but still, it was just like, it was so many. And it also you felt competitive when you use this controller.
Yeah. The PS3 controller didn't get Rumble until like 2 or 3 years in.
You feel like you're going to drink a Mountain Dew Livewire when you're using this controller.
You're going to drink some Halo 3 game fuel when you pick up an Xbox 360 controller.
Every time you're drinking Mountain Dew, it's a code red when you're using this controller.
Jeff Keighley is looking down upon you with his Doritos and Mountain Dew in Call of Duty.
And he's proud of you.
He's
so
proud
of you.
He's going to give you a hug.
This controller reminds me of camping out on the Hanoi level of Call of Duty. That's what this controller reminds me of me getting into a stack of 6 people, all of us friends, and agreeing to hold down one area of the map. We were the worst, but it was fun. All right. I think that's just what we got. We got what to say. The only thing maybe I disagree with the controller is I don't like the white because it would get a bunch of like gross marks on it, you know?
Oh,
it really
you get
shows.
another color.
But yeah,
a black one.
I guess that's true. So, all right. 360 controller, we love you. So then let's go to we kind of skipped it, but let's go. This isn't the right era, but let's go to the Dreamcast.
Dreamcast controller is
This is all you, yeah.
Okay, if I'm making the call here, I'm going to go with my gut. Let me find it on the internet first so that I can put it on the screen for everybody.
I mean,
this is
the Dreamcast, yeah, I never played the Dreamcast controller. I personally, just looking at it, I love the cord comes out of the bottom. I think that's pretty cool.
It's awful. It's the worst.
Awful? Okay,
it's truly
I take
terrible.
It back. I think it's different, and it's a thing that Tyler hates.
It's terrible because it just folds back. All it does is put an unnecessary stress on the wire to fold back because it has to go out forward. And there's a little spot on the back of a Dreamcast controller that like grabs it, that like sort of you can push it in and it grips it for you, which is like, so you knew that this is the way the controller wire was going to go and chose to do it on the bottom anyway.
Oh, see, I always put my Sega Dreamcast behind me when I played.
Got it. And you play with a series of mirrors.
Yeah, and I played with mirrors, and I always, I play backwards. You never did that?
No.
In your Dreamcast?
No, I did know that of people that would do that to play when they had like the Wavebird for the GameCube. They would, they had a series of mirrors hooked up so they could play from the bathroom with their Wavebird.
That's awesome. I would actually take my Dreamcast, and I would go to the State Fair. And I would go into the Funhouse Mirrors area, and I'd set it up in there, and I'd play it that way. That's
and the Dreamcast would be behind you while you did this.
Mm-hmm. While eating an elephant ear. Be great. Great time.
That's why your Dreamcast controller is all greasy.
That's right. And covered in sugar. What do you think about this controller, though, Tyler? Okay. You're the one that has the experience. I've maybe touched one 2 times in my lifetime.
I got to go with my gut here and put it on the E tier.
Oh, you did the tease. You did the tease with it.
I put it in a different one so that I could line it, so I could size it correctly.
Sega is really getting the business from us right now.
They are. They don't have the good controllers. The Dreamcast controller is not good. What was really cool about it was the VMU thing was very cool with the little memory card through the window. That was awesome. It was cool that it had 2 slots for memory cards because this was also where they had their Rumble Pack, so similar to like the Nintendo 64 Rumble Pack that clicked in because it wasn't built into the controller. So you could put a memory card in, but you could also put the Rumble Pack in behind it, or you could put a couple of memory cards in. That was pretty neat. For that reason, it goes D tier then, because it is better than the Duke for that reason. Okay. Well, the Duke has 2 memory card slots too, but doesn't have a little window for the screen. And the VMU was cool, and I'm sad that it didn't really catch on. I think the biggest problem with the VMU was that the batteries were like watch batteries, and they died pretty easily. And like if you left it alone for a couple of weeks and came back, the battery would be dead, and you couldn't use the VMU. You could still save games on it and stuff, but so then you'd have to replace these like really obscure, weird watch batteries in it, and that was really frustrating.
That's a bummer. That is a real big bummer. So
everybody who owns a Dreamcast knows that like 95% of the time those VMU batteries were dead.
All right. I think this feels good to me. You know, it's your call. And I think
tier.
I will stand beside you on this adventure together. You. Sorry, Dreamcast fans. Okay. Next controller is one near and dear to my heart. And that is the Nintendo 64 controller.
The Nintendo 64 controller.
Now, I say it's near and dear to my heart, but I fully understand there are some serious problems with the Nintendo 64 controller. And I will not be treating it fairly.
What do you mean fairly? Of course, you'll be treating it fairly. Or are you saying it's going to get higher ranked just because you love it? I mean, I guess I'm not going to be treating, I guess fairly is the wrong word. I'm not going to be treating it well, is what I'm saying. Okay, got it.
I think this is, the highest it can be is C tier, but I'm honestly leaning more towards D tier.
It just looks like it was unfinished in terms of thought. Like They didn't know, and I get that at the time they didn't really know if 3D games were going to be the thing, and so the idea here, I think, was that like, well, if 3D games don't really take off and there's no use for the joystick, that's okay. People can just hold it like a regular controller, use a D-pad, everything's going to be fine. But that was also true of the PlayStation controller, and I think the DualShock controller was out by the time the Nintendo 64 controller was. Maybe not, though. But they had the superior design, at least, but pretty quickly after the Nintendo 64 did. I can imagine Nintendo looking at the DualShock and going, 2 joysticks? No, that's too confusing for people.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some major flaws with this controller. You could either have to choose rumble or a memory card. That's a bummer of a choice.
Yeah. Though not as big of a bummer as on something like another console where the only way to save games was a memory card, because really not that many games needed the memory card for the Nintendo 64.
That is true. I mean, a lot of the good games, especially later on its life cycle, had built-in saves, like think about like Smash Brothers and stuff like that.
Yeah, but Tony Hawk, that needed a controller pack.
It did, and it corrupted so many times for me.
Yep. And saving your ghost on Mario Kart did, but the like saving your progress on like how many cups you had done and stuff was stored on the cartridge, but ghosts and stuff were saved on a memory card.
But wasn't Mario 64 also saved to the cart? Most mainline Nintendo
most games were saved to the cartridge. It was actually, I think it was the exception to have a game that only supported saving on the controller pack.
Well, other flaw with this Nintendo 64 controller is that analog stick, if it breaks now, or if it wears, or if it gets stick drift, the only way to fix it is to fix it well, I should say, because there's third-party parts out there. You got to rip apart another one and fix it. Did you know that?
Yeah, and it like grinds to dust, too. It like is not very good plastic.
It's just plastic on plastic grinding to dust. There was not a lot of thought process put into that. And I think a lot of the controllers I have some stick drift, and there's like just nothing you can do because it just wears down. So longevity-wise, it also gets marked low.
Yeah,
I'm leaning towards D tier just because I don't want to put it in E or F because I love it so much. But what do you think? Does D sound fair?
Yeah.
Should my Nintendo 64 go live on an E farm upstate? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I have a lot of love for it. Like, so it does look unfinished. It feels like it's two different paradigms crammed into one thing. The joke is that you need 3 hands to play it. Haha. Very funny. We've all heard it. But it did still work for what it was trying to do. And it had the Z button, which was pretty sweet for like first-person shooters. For GoldenEye specifically, was very cool. The C buttons to control the camera, that was a gamble they took that I don't think paid off. I think they should have just had a second analog stick. But I can understand Nintendo being like, we don't want to give people 2 analog sticks at the same time to learn. So
yeah, I think D tier is good for it.
Yeah,
it makes me sad, but it also, the one thing it had going for it, the later models that were really cool and like kind of like a translucent neon color that you could see all the parts inside.
Yeah,
that
those
was
fantastic
cool.
colors.
That was real
like,
cool. Yeah,
and they sold N64s in those same colors too to match.
They did. Yeah,
that was pretty cool. Yeah, that was a good time.
Well, N64 controller, I think you're going to live on the D list. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, what's next?
Let's go to GameCube because we're kind of hitting the modern era with the other companies, and I want to catch Nintendo up here, if that's okay.
Okay. GameCube controller.
GameCube controller is what we're doing. Big improvement upon
huge
the 64 controller. It looks cool. It feels cool. I know some people prefer it.
Yep. There are a lot of folks who would play games today with this controller, myself included. D-pad, the best Nintendo D-pad. The C-Stick is kind of weird because it's like a little bit smaller, and I'm not a huge fan of how they tried to make it be like different. Like they were like, okay, we'll give you 2 joysticks, but we need you to know that this other one is very different, which is like, don't insult your users' intelligence, Nintendo. They know that the joysticks are different. I did like the button layout. I love the huge A button, the B button. These little like kidney bean X and Y buttons are cool. It's got a Z button, but it does not have a corresponding button on the left side, which is kind of a bummer. Yeah,
they moved the Z to that upper button on the right, the blue button.
Yeah, But it does have analog triggers, which was the style at the time because the Xbox had analog triggers as well. The PS2 did not. Although you kind of could because the buttons were pressure sensitive. So like maybe a game could have used them as analog triggers, but they didn't.
How do you feel about... Should we do the Wavebird and this one separately? Do we talk about the Wavebird? The Wavebird was officially Nintendo, so...
Yeah, I don't think they're meaningful. I mean, one of them's wireless, so like, yeah, it's better. They didn't have Rumble, so like that's kind of a bummer on the Wavebird. I don't know if they're different enough that we would give them separate.
Okay, let's agree that we're
listings.
keeping them together. So when we have the GameCube controller, just also realize the Wavebird is a part of that.
Yeah.
I think this is an A.
I was gonna say the same thing.
I think this
Rumble.
is an A.
I love the analog triggers more than any other trigger today, except maybe even the PS5, because it had the like they were analog and then they clicked at the bottom too, so you had like a little bit of digital feedback as well, which the PS5 kind of does with its haptic triggers, which is pretty neat.
Also, the most interesting looking of the controllers in these higher tiers, I would say.
It still looks like a game controller.
Yeah,
I think it's cool.
It's pleasing to the eye.
Yeah.
All right.
A tier. I'm down. I would consider it on par with the Xbox 360 controller. Maybe a little bit less just because it's missing like a left bumper, but not enough to demote it a whole
But
tier.
it's definitely better than the other ones in our B tier, I would say.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's move on to the PlayStation 4.
PlayStation 4 controller. Okay.
Now, this is kind of the creme de la creme of PlayStation controllers, right? I feel like PlayStation has a good arc where they've improved every year, you'd say, right?
Yeah, I think this is...
It's got that touchscreen thing right there.
That was pretty cool, and that worked. That was really nice for games like Final Fantasy XIV, where they had like a mouse cursor thing going on. It was a very good game to play on controller no matter what, but like having that touchpad as like a backup for the mouse cursor was pretty neat. It had analog triggers, wireless, micro USB. You could plug headphones into the bottom and hear your game through them, which I guess the Xbox One did that as well.
There's something about the square, triangle, circle, X buttons, though, that I see that and I'm like, gaming. I just think gaming, you know?
Yeah.
Way more than letters. I think that's cooler.
Yeah. I think it's more comfortable in the hand than a older PlayStation controller as well.
I think we A-tier it.
So, yeah, I think it's A-tier.
We're kind of getting to the modern era where...
We need to get to some S-tier. I don't think it's quite S-tier because I don't... Well, we can make the comparison when we get an S-tier controller.
I have one on this list that I feel like for sure you and I will agree it's an S-tier controller.
Okay.
But we're not there yet.
What's next?
All right, that was the PlayStation 4. So let's go to the Xbox One, Xbox Series controllers. They're very similar. Tyler and I were talking about this before the started, so we're counting
I think there's not meaningful enough difference to mark them separately. I think this is the one on the screen is the Series controller. The D-pad is maybe a little different, I guess, but I haven't used the Series controller.
It is different. I'm looking at my controller right now. It's got that circular part in there. But
yeah,
I honestly haven't used the Series controller yet. What do you think of the Series controller?
I haven't used it either. So maybe I shouldn't. Maybe this is a bad example. Maybe we should just grab the Xbox One controller.
Xbox One controller? I love the Xbox One controller. I'm a big fan of it. I don't think there's anything about it that's like mind-blowing though. I mean, I want to make it S tier because it's the controller I love and I plug into my PC when I want to use a controller.
I was going to say the same thing. I think it's S tier because it's just the natural progression of like the controller S was good. The 360 controller was better. I would use an Xbox One controller over a 360 controller every time.
Yeah. It's got a really clean look to it too. Like it looks... Yeah. And let's make it S tier. I agree with you.
Especially if you're using it on an Xbox One, you can plug your headphones in. You can hear the game through the headphones on the controller, which is very cool. It works pretty seamlessly with a PC. It's Bluetooth in that sense. So is the PlayStation 4 controller.
Only on some of the newer better ones. On it too than the 360. Like it doesn't like the 360's got some extra curves to it that it doesn't need to have. And this one is like smoothed out. I'm looking at mine right now and I'm just like, it feels so good to hold in your hand.
And when you pull those triggers, they're so smooth. Like it feels like the Xbox 360 controller, when you pull the triggers, or really any other analog trigger controller, they feel like you can feel the springs in it when you pull the trigger, you know? Whereas I don't know how the triggers work in the Xbox One controller, but it feels so smooth that it doesn't feel like there's mechanical things happening inside. It feels like it's magic to me.
Ooh, magic controllers.
So maybe there's like magnets or something. How do they work?
Who knows? No one knows.
No one knows. So anyway, I think it's S tier. I think the Xbox One controller is S tier.
Nice. All right. I agree. I agree. I mean, I was afraid to say that, and I'm glad that you made the plunge and made me realize it is. I was too afraid of being a fanboy on this podcast, but every time I plug a controller into my computer, it's an Xbox One controller. It just feels right.
I do have one thing that I think I need to discuss changing with you. I think the PlayStation 4 controller is also S tier. Because I'm looking at this, and all of the pluses of using an Xbox One controller are on the PlayStation 4 controller, except that touchpad is so cool. That touchpad makes it so playing games on your PC is better. Although I don't like the joystick layout. I like the Xbox joystick layout better.
Yeah, I think because I had a sneaking suspicion that you were going to put the PS5 controller as S tier. In which case, I would say that they can't both be up there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think the PlayStation 4 controller is better than the PlayStation 5 controller? We can just go to that right now. We just do PlayStation 5 if you want.
Okay.
I mean, we have a ton of Nintendo to go through, but that's still fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me pull up the PS5 controller.
Let's figure this out. Let's get to the bottom of this. How are you feeling about that Super Nintendo controller? Is it just in your heart?
I think B is fine. B is fine.
Okay. Good. Sure you don't want to put it as A? You don't want to put it as A? I'm just kidding.
Okay. So
why
PlayStation
does the
5 controller.
PlayStation 5 controller look like a space helmet? I don't know why.
It kind of does. It's a little bit like more convex, like it pushes out, you know, like there's pressure inside the controller pushing it out like a balloon.
It looks like a robot in Portal 2.
Yeah, it kind of does. The haptics on it are amazing. They're so cool. Like if you have a PlayStation 5 and you haven't played Astro's Big Adventure, or is that the name of the game? Though it comes with the PlayStation 5. It's not only just a really fun like trek through PlayStation history, but that game uses the haptics in this controller so well that it like makes you realize what's possible. It's kind of a bummer that a lot of games don't like utilize it to the same extent. But I don't think it's as comfortable to hold in the hand as the PlayStation 4 controller. If I could have a PlayStation 4 controller with the haptics of the PlayStation 5, I think I'd take that.
See, and I thought those haptics were going to make it so that you wanted to bump it up to S tier. But if that's the case, let's make this one A tier, and let's make the PS4 S tier. Let's do that.
Okay, they're cool, but they don't make up for the how it feels to hold in your hand. I just think it's just not as good.
Nice.
Okay, so we'll make the PlayStation 5 A tier, PlayStation 4 is S tier, right up there with the Xbox One controller.
That means both of that generation's controllers are great.
That's what I'm saying. Over time, controllers get better.
It's weird to me that PlayStation regressed, but it just doesn't feel as good to hold in your hand. It does look like it's got some sleekness going on to it, but maybe they're too thin on the bottom for your hands to hold.
You talking about the PlayStation 5?
Yeah, just looking at it.
It just feels like it's a more bubbly in your hand. I don't know how to describe it.
Gotcha.
Beyond that, it just feels like, yeah.
I think that's fine. That's fair. Okay,
like somebody pumped a little extra air into the PlayStation 4 controller, you know?
Stop inflating my PlayStation 5 controller, Sony. Okay. Wii.
Next.
The Wii, we have three controllers for the Wii we're going to discuss.
Okay, let's go Wii and nunchuck combo. Let's just treat that as a unit.
Wii and nunchuck combo, I think is great. I think it lacks the control you have in these modern two-handed one controller dealios.
Yeah, I think it only really works for Wii games.
Agreed.
And like NES games, because you can hold the controller sideways. But like really it only works for Wii games. Like you wouldn't hook up a Wii remote to your controller and like be like, okay, I'm going to go play Spider-Man Remastered on Steam, right?
Agree. I know it also, in a way, I'm mad at the Wii controller because it spawned all those stupid plastic inserts for it.
Yeah.
Like it started with the steering wheel, which was cool, but then it just got out of hand. It got way out of hand.
Yeah, and there were like a lot of companies just trying to make a buck by being like, here's a tennis racket hookup for your Wii, and it's like, it's just a piece of plastic that you put. I mean, so was the steering wheel, but at least...
I could have just took a steering wheel from a car and cut a hole in it and put my Wiimote inside and be like, oh, look, it's a steering wheel. Like, I think this is like C tier.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it was briefly extremely influential because of the motion controls and because the Wii sold like hotcakes and gangbusters. And so the competition decided, oh, must be the controller, because it obviously wasn't the graphics, not knowing that it was actually the games. And it was actually really just Wii Sports. I think Wii Sports is like solely responsible for just the sheer absurd number of Wiis that were sold. Not that there weren't other good games, but I think the reason it sold those just absolutely bonkers numbers, it was because of Wii Sports.
Agreed. I played so much Wii Sports, and I think most people that listen to this podcast have played some Wii Sports in their time and realized that was the golden age of motion controls.
Yep.
In my college
really
dormitory.
Was kind of the only games that did a great job. I'm sure there are people that'll be like, well, no, there was this other game that did a really good job with the motion controls. Sure. But then Sony and Microsoft thought that that's what they needed to copy, and so we got the Kinect, which we're not even going to put on this list, probably. Not great. Although the PlayStation controllers from the 3 on do still maintain some motion control stuff in them, but it's not intrusive. It's not like the Wiimote was designed, like it was like you have to use motion controls if you're going to use the Wiimote. The PlayStation 3 Plus controllers, it's just in there, and a developer can choose to use it if they have a cool idea for it. But if they don't, it's fine. They don't have to. I think that's a good way to do that feature.
All right.
So yeah, C tier. I think we're C tier, and maybe people will disagree, but that's where we're at.
Next up, we're going to keep doing some Nintendo and go to the Wii U gamepad and the Wii U Pro. I've never used these controllers in my life.
They are separate entities.
Is the Wii U Pro controller like the Switch Pro?
Kind
Trying
of.
to be
so
like
let's
that?
talk about the gamepad. Was it comfortable?
It's bulky, right? It's pretty bulky.
Yeah, it's bulky. It was actually more comfortable to hold than it looks, because it had some really nice grippies on the back. And it had like L and R buttons on the back, and the touchscreen was fine. To rank this high, you've got to really appreciate the paradigm shift that Nintendo was going for here. And I don't think they were successful in this sort of like dual screen gaming thing that they were kind of trying to do. It seemed like they had this neat idea that they thought could make some really cool games, and it just never really materialized, in part because every game needed to be playable on just one screen, because Nintendo had the requirement, I think rightfully so, the requirement that games needed to be playable only on the gamepad. So like if you weren't turning your TV on or somebody else was using the TV, you could play on the gamepad, which was really cool. That was like a really, really cool feature of this controller. But because games had to be playable on just the one screen, it was hard to design games around needing both screens. That said, there were some fun party games. Nintendo Land comes to mind. I'm sure there are tons of other party games, because this was a Wii console, and that's basically all the games were party games that involved like having 4 players on like standard Wii remotes doing something, and then the person on the gamepad was like a different player in the game, and they like had more information because they had the gamepad or something like that. Like there's like a haunted house one on Nintendo Land where like the person on the gamepad like can see more of the world or something because they're looking at their gamepad. That kind of stuff was cool, but
I've never played Nintendo Land. Now I kind of want to play this party game.
Yeah, Nintendo Land is really cool. It's probably one of the better Wii U games, and it is one of the few that like if they put it on the Switch would require massive changes, because the games were very I don't want to say asymmetrical in that sense, where like some people would use the Wii, one person would use the pad and everybody else would use something else, and it was like the person with the pad had different information. Had a front-facing camera on it, useful for nothing except making a Mii of your face, I guess. It could control your TV. It had an IR blaster in it, so that was cool.
That is cool.
It was rechargeable. It had a little dock thing.
It's funny because the controller is part of this console, it has so many more features than a normal controller does. But
yeah,
from the feeling of the controller, where do you think it ranks?
Like as a, it's so hard to separate it from the screen on it, because the screen is such a big part. Do we need to? So is that a requirement? We need to separate this controller from the screen and just say how was controlling games with it?
Yeah, because I think the screen is the console, right? Am I wrong to think that? That would give the Wii U an edge. It's got way more stuff than all these other controllers do, technically, right?
Yeah, I guess yeah. This one's hard. This was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I guess we have to compare it on the same metrics as the other controllers. Like we didn't give it bonus points to the Dreamcast controller because it had the VMU, right?
No.
I mean, we talked about it, but we weren't just like that elevates it a tier. Although this screen does way more than a VMU ever did.
Yeah. How did the D-pad stuff feel though? Was it good? You remember it being good?
Yeah, all the buttons were good. By this point in time, like buttons and joysticks feel good. You know, they're all.
Well, what about putting it at B?
But what about what?
Putting it at B tier or C tier, B tier? What are you thinking?
Well,
do you want to go higher?
Kinda. People will look at this and say, "Wow, that looks terrible and awful to hold." I promise you, it was not. If you've never held one, if you've held one and you think it was terrible, then you're wrong. Then
you're the one with the experience. Let's put it at A tier. Let's put it at A tier. If that's your hunch, that's your hunch. We got to go with your gut.
All right. I could talk about it forever because it's hard to compare it on the same metrics. Like if you're comparing it on the same metrics as other, I guess it's A tier. I really liked it. I thought it was really comfortable to hold.
And I know you're a Wii U guy. We've talked about it before.
Yeah, it just feels like comparing cars and just being like, well, you know, they both get you to the same place, so I guess they're both A tier. And it's like, well, one of these is a Tesla and the other one is like a 30-year-old Honda Civic. And like, yeah, they both do that. And if that's all we're grading them on, then I guess they're the same, but they're not the same, you know?
Yeah, I get that. What do you think of the Wii U Pro controller, though? What is that? What is this like?
I will speak on this one much less. Let me pull it up here. Have you ever used this one?
I've never used the Wii U Pro controller.
I'm going to pull it up here.
Didn't the Wii have a Pro controller that was like a gamepad that kind of looked like an S?
Yeah, it looked like sort of like a Super Nintendo controller and had like bigger. Some joysticks. Yeah.
Wow, that just looks like an Xbox controller, straight up.
I'm telling you right now, this is S tier. This controller is
Whoa,
the traditional controllers. Of traditional controllers, it's at least tied with the Xbox One controller. This thing seriously got like 70 hours of battery life on a full charge. It was incredible. The D-pad is great. All the buttons are awesome. One of the few controllers that puts the two joysticks like above the other buttons, but still parallel to each other, like a reverse PlayStation controller. Loved it. Thought it was fantastic. Doesn't have analog triggers. That's kind of a bummer. Uses mini USB like the PlayStation 3. When it could, I think it could have used micro USB in 2012. That could have been, yeah, definitely could have used micro USB. So like, okay, I'm not really going to subtract points just because I love holding it so much. It's like the most comfortable controller to hold in your hand though.
Here's the test. When I come down and visit you, I'm going to ask to hold this controller.
Okay. And you'll get what I'm saying. I think my battery is dead in it, and it's like the PlayStation 3 controller. It's like rechargeable. Yeah, I'm going to have to replace it probably.
You can probably replace it, though. If you love the controller, you will replace it.
Yeah. It's the reason I use my Xbox controller, honestly, is just because on the PC, it just works with everything. Like, it just connects and works, whereas, like, to use a Wii U controller, it's a little bit more kind of a pain to do. So that's really a big reason. So anyway, I'm saying it. Wii U Pro controller, S tier. Loved it. What's next?
All right. So we got the PS5 already. That was A tier, so I can cross that one out. Let's leave Nintendo and go to our wild card.
Okay.
That is the Steam controller.
You know where I'm putting this.
You're going to put it at S tier.
This thing is it's above S tier. It goes just way up.
What's higher than S tier? S plus tier?
I don't know. I'll, for the sake of consistency, I'll put it at S tier because of just how programmable it is. It's just truly like you go into Steam and it does literally whatever you want. I still use mine all the time, even though they stopped making it. It's a little bit of a bummer when because it only has one real joystick. When you have a game that doesn't support using a controller and mouse and keyboard at the same time, it gets a little trickier to program it. In a way, you're either programming the whole thing as if it's a keyboard and mouse, which gives you like weird button prompts when you're like using it, because it'll be like press F to do this thing. You'll be like, which button did I make F again? Or you use it as an Xbox controller, in which case the touchpad thing kind of doesn't feel quite like a mouse. It feels a little weird because it's emulating a joystick instead of a mouse. It does have like a mouse joystick mode that sort of makes it feel a little better, but it's still not great. For those that don't know and aren't watching this video, the Steam controller has two gigantic, like where your thumbs would be, two gigantic touch pads, and they're like circular, and they have really good haptics in them. So as you move your finger across them, it kind of like does like haptic vibrations so that you can feel it as it goes. One of the best ways to set that is to set it up to feel like a trackball, like you know how you could like sort of fling a trackball and like it would spin while you're not touching it if you like gave it some momentum. You do that with the Steam controller. It's like the touchpads on the Steam Deck, if you're familiar with that. They're the same thing. It also has a regular joystick, and it's got A, B, X, Y buttons, and it has a Steam button, and it has analog triggers, right bumper, left bumper, and it has two buttons on the back, like that you can sort of squeeze as well, like the Steam Deck, but only two. The Steam Deck has 4 buttons on the back. It's awesome just because of how programmable it is. I love it. Works with Bluetooth, has its own receiver also. If you want, it's
Does it feel
amazing.
good in the hand?
It is my favorite controller in the whole wide world, and I'm so sad they don't make any more of it. When they put them on sale and they're like, we don't make these anymore, here they are, $5. I bought another one and it sits in my closet, and I'm like, one day when my Steam controller breaks, I will have another one ready to go.
See, that's funny because I really want one. I missed out. I should have got one when they did the sale thing because I definitely want one.
I have a feeling with the success of the Steam Deck that they're going to do like a Steam controller too, and it won't be exactly the same. They'll do some different stuff with it. I hope they'll put a second analog stick on it, and somehow figure out how to make 2 touchpads and 2 analog sticks work like they did on the Steam Deck. That's like the dream. I have a feeling they're going to do that because of how successful the Steam Deck was.
Nice. All right. That was our wild card. It's an S tier.
Yep, loving it.
Last 2, the Nintendo Switch. First, we're going to talk about the Joy-Cons.
Okay, Joy-Cons. So we'll talk about them, I guess, individually and also as a pair.
Yeah, individually, I think they're not very good because they're so tiny. They feel terrible. Together, better. But
better. On their own, they're cool because of how convenient they are, right? Like you have this thing that you normally play by yourself, and on their own they're okay, or together they're okay. But suddenly they become 2 controllers, and so now that they're separate, you can play with your friend. And in a world where you wouldn't have brought another controller anyway, that's infinitely amazing because now you can play a 2-player game that you would have never been able to play before. That said, using a Joy-Con on its own is not good. It's
a bummer.
Worse. It's worse than a Genesis controller.
Yeah. Oh, you think so? You think these are F tier?
So. On their own. But when you Voltron them together, I think they're B tier.
I was going to give it C.
Because
we have to combine the idea that when they play by themselves, they're terrible.
Okay, so if we average it out...
If we average it out, it'll be D tier. But I think we can give it a C.
Yeah, I think so.
It feels modern. It controls well. It's just tiny is the only problem.
It's also, I feel bad, like sort of taking points off of it for it being bad at a feature that none of these other controllers even have. You know, like you can't just split your PlayStation 3 controller in half and now it's 2 controllers. So if we're going to say the experience of playing with it by itself subtracts, then we have to say like, well, you just can't do that with the PlayStation 3. So we have to subtract. Or with any other controller. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels bad. Of course, maybe these other controllers, they don't advertise themselves as being able to be something that they're not. And so maybe if your thing is bad at something, you shouldn't tell people that it can do that thing.
Yep. I agree with you there. I think...
All right, C tier.
C tier. I think C tier. Okay. And the next controller, which is funny, the Switch Pro. This is my S tier controller. This is the one that I love. I love the way the Switch Pro feels.
Yep. I agree. I think it's great.
But there's a lot of S tiers there.
Well, hey, controllers are good,
Is
man.
it just as special as all those 4 up there to you?
Well, if we're ranking our S tier here, I'm going to put Steam controller greater than everything. I'm going to put the Wii U Pro controller behind it. I'm going to put the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One controller tied. And I'm going to put Switch Lite or Switch Pro controller last. If we're just ranking S tier, like these are all S tier controllers. We recognize they're all very good. That's how I would rank them. But I do think it's better than the Xbox 360 controller. I think it's better than the GameCube controller. It doesn't have analog triggers, but neither does the Wii U Pro controller.
Yeah, let's make it S tier. Let's do it. We got a lot of S's, but that's fine.
That's fine. Hey, it's okay to like things, you know?
You know what's funny to me, Tyler, is you were talking about the Steam controller, and you mentioned there were some issues with it as far as like not knowing what buttons you programmed and stuff like that. And it's so good that it doesn't distract from the S tier.
No.
And I love that. I love that's a true S tier.
I use the Steam controller on everything on my PC. So the only thing that I would say maybe would demote it from being the top of S tier is the fact that you gotta program it for whatever game you're trying to play. You gotta like sit down and say, okay, how am I using the Steam controller with this? Whereas with any of these other controllers that just you know how you're going to use it, right? So the amazing amount of options is a huge plus. The like paralysis of choice and the fact that you have to pick an option is like kind of a downside. There are a lot of good community things. Like you can go in there and see what other people have done. And you usually like, if you just pick whatever the most popular community one is, like that's going to be pretty good.
Nice.
But it's like one of the only controllers. It's one of the few controllers that will let you play like a real-time strategy or like you could play a Civilization with this controller. You could do that with the PlayStation 4 controller because it also has a touchpad for moving a mouse around. But you wouldn't want like moving a mouse around with the PlayStation 4 controller. Wouldn't be you wouldn't want to be that to be your primary input for like a Civilization style game. Whereas on the Steam controller, you could use the touchpad and it would just be your primary input, and that wouldn't be weird.
If I wanted a new Steam controller right now, it would cost me $129.99.
Wow, really?
For eBay. Yeah.
Dang, dude.
It's a bummer.
I think they'll come out with a new one.
I mean, there's one here that's for $48 though.
Okay. It also uses standard AA batteries, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
So,
I mean, I think these are cool controllers. These are really cool controllers. And they're like a piece of history. You know, it could be Valve's only controller, technically, they ever make.
I wish I'd bought more.
Yeah, especially when they were like $5 or whatever you're saying. They were really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do we feel about the list? This is it.
Let's recap it for those not watching. S tier, or let's start at F tier. F tier. Sega Genesis, both iterations, 6-button and 3-button, garbage. The 3D Sega Saturn controller, also garbage. The regular Sega Saturn controller is not on the list, but we also rated that as F tier. Basically, Sega, not really good at controllers here, especially in the early days. E tier. Xbox original Duke controller, the big one. Not good. Too big. D tier. Some people are going to disagree. We got the NES controller on D tier because it's not very comfortable to hold.
It's so sharp.
It's so sharp. It's not very versatile. It really only does the things that it does. Like it's got 2 buttons. Well, 4 buttons, but really only 2 buttons, right? Like we get it. It's history, whatever. It's not a great controller. You wouldn't choose to use it today over anything else. D tier is also Dreamcast controller. Not great. Single joystick in a time when dual joystick games were like kind of a thing. That the Dreamcast definitely suffered for that. D-pad, not good. VMU, cool. Analog triggers, pretty cool. Also D tier, Nintendo 64 controller. What are you doing, guys? Come on.
It's good. I don't have
Make
3
a
hands.
choice.
Hey.
Pick a lane. Pick a lane. That's all. Pick a lane. Okay, you want to take C tier, Mike?
C tier, we have the NES the Dogbone controller. Not Jawbone, that would be terrifying. The Dogbone controller. And that one's just bad because it's better than the NES, but it's not great.
It just looks like it's like an NES controller trying to be a Super Nintendo controller. You know, it's a little brother that saw the Super Nintendo controller and went, I want to be like that too.
Exactly. Then we have the Wiimote and the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck, and that's good for Wii games, but not much else. And that was the big reason why it's C tier. Then we have the Switch Joy-Cons. It's good controllers. They're the only ones that split in half and make 2 controllers. But when you play split in half, it's just not a good experience, I think. It's just tiny controllers. It feels weird.
Yep.
B tier. PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 controllers, we're kind of putting those together, and they're fine. I mean, B tier is not bad, so we can go through these pretty quick. Xbox S controller, big improvement on the Duke controller, but not right Xbox 360 or Xbox One, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
SNES B tier, probably the best of the early is the best of the early controllers if you just look at this list, but it's still got some issues.
It's not so much that it's bad. It's just that there are things that we would put above it. Many things that we would put above it. That's all.
Yeah. And then we have the PlayStation 3 controller I'm looking at as a B tier.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that one's B tier is because PS4 and PS5 just big improvements. Same thing as the Xbox. So A tier, we got Xbox 360 because it's a great controller, but not the best of this Xbox lineup. A tier also, we got GameCube because the GameCube controller is a great controller. Some people stand by this controller no matter what.
And the joysticks have the most satisfying noise, I think. You know, when you're watching people play Smash Bros, you can hear them doing their smash attacks and it like the click the joystick makes.
Yeah, it's
That's
good
the
noise.
best sounding joystick of all of them, I think.
Good noise. And then we also have the PlayStation 5 controller. Good experiment with the haptics. Those feel really good, but this doesn't feel as good in your hand as a PS4 controller. And then the Wii U, controversial. We're giving it all the merits of what it is, which is the stuff inside of it, but I think that's fine. It's an A tier. And we're gonna stand by that. Because
I think it's
according to
comfortable.
Tyler, it's comfortable to hold. So
if you look at it and don't think it's comfortable, you should hold it because I think you'll find it's much more comfortable than it looks.
That's right. You want to do the S tiers, Tyler? You do the S tiers.
Sure. With the S tier, it's mostly modern stuff. We got the Xbox One / Series controller. They're similar enough. We kind of lumped them together. Easy. It just feels good. Very comfortable. Analog triggers. The joysticks feel good. D-pad feels pretty good. Amazing PC connectivity. Just USB that thing right in or Bluetooth it, or you can get a receiver for it as well. It works. Any game with controller support on PC made in the last 15 years works with the Xbox One controller with no issues. Also S tier, PlayStation 4 controller. Feels better in the hand than the PlayStation 5. We love the touchpad. For those rare times, especially in PC gaming, when you need like a mouse. Or if you're playing Final Fantasy 14 on your PlayStation 4 and you want to just click on something real quick, you can use a touchpad for a mouse. It's super cool. Also has some motion control stuff going on, analog triggers. It's got everything else that a modern controller needs. Next S tier, Wii U Pro controller. Because I love the joystick placement. Doesn't have analog triggers, that's a bummer, but it is so extremely comfortable to hold in the hand and extra long battery life, man. The thing lasts like 70 hours on a charge. It's amazing.
Yeah, the Switch Pro controller doesn't last as long, but it's still got a good 40-hour battery life, I think.
Yeah, it's still good. Like, and it's easy to plug a Switch controller in because I came with a cable and stuff. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, super easy.
Next on the S tier list, my personal favorite controller of all time, the Steam controller. I rank it this high, even though it has downsides, such as having to program it. No second analog stick is a little bit of a bummer. But I just love it. I think it's the best. I love being able to program games to work with it. I played through so many games with just this controller. So many games on PC that only work with mouse and keyboard that just don't have controller support. You can use a Steam controller on those. You can make it pretend it's a mouse and keyboard, and then it'll work great.
I think that is what makes it S tier. That is more powerful than anything any of these other controllers can do. Like, just that alone, you can play StarCraft with it if you wanted to.
Yeah, and the amount of customization stuff that you can do with like, okay, if I press X, that's going to send this keyboard click. If I hold down X for 3 seconds, that's going to send a different button click. If I'm holding the left trigger and then I press X, that could be something completely different. And you can have like almost different, like multiple controllers in one. Anyway, I got to stop talking about the Steam controller because I will just keep talking about it forever because I love it so much. Last one in our S tier, the Switch Pro controller. Mike, tell us why.
This might be my personal favorite controller. I think it feels the most comfortable of all of these. And I mean, every time I played Breath of the Wild, I only wanted to use this controller. It felt so good. And then also, I don't know what its connectivity is like with PCs. I'm assuming it's not as good.
It's pretty good, actually. Steam supports it natively. Yeah, so you can just link it right up and use it on your PC if you got Bluetooth.
Because I might start doing that because honestly, like this controller is one of my favorites. I don't know how I feel like this versus Xbox One controller. I like them both. I like them both equally.
Yeah. The only bummer about using a Switch controller on PC is if you're using Steam to make it emulate an Xbox controller, the button prompts aren't going to line up because your game will say press A and you'll look down at your controller and you'll be like, my
Where's
A button
the
is
A
different.
button? Yeah, exactly. It'll be weird.
Yeah.
But I love this controller. It feels good. I almost makes you wonder, like, Nintendo, why don't you just release these controllers with your systems? Like, why do we have to do this pro dance? You know what I mean? Why can't we just have these with the consoles? Because they feel so good.
Yep.
I just want Nintendo to jump into the modern era with everyone else. So I feel good about this list. I feel like we did a really good job.
Yeah, I think it's good. Also, Switch Pro controller, USB-C. That's a plus.
That is the other thing I forgot to mention about it. How much I love it. Yeah. All right. That's it.
That's
for
the
tier list. Really quick, what you been playing?
Oh man, I have to switch my brain around. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 still. I'm about 10 hours in. I'm moving kind of slow with it. But I've been trying to put some time in almost every night. That's really pretty much it, to be honest. I've been spending some of my time doing other stuff when I've got free time, so I haven't been playing a ton of games, but Xenoblade is what I'm playing.
Nice. I've been playing the Black Mesa. I've been playing Black Mesa. I'm on the Zen levels now. Completely redone. Love them. They look great, and that's totally different. All the puzzles are different.
I need to do that. I gotta play Black Mesa still.
Platforming still has some annoying areas, but they definitely fixed a lot of it. And I love it. I think it's a great game. I think it's totally worth the money. I think it's like $20 on Steam or something like that, maybe 30.
I think I bought it when it was like $5 on sale, like way back.
Yeah, so. I got it on sale for cheap. I want to say like 15 or something like that. So if you bought it before it came out and it was in like early access,
yeah, I think so.
You probably got it for $5. Yeah. So I've been playing that, and then I also picked up Darkest Dungeon again today. I just did a couple runs in that for fun.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever beat that game. It's so hard, but I love it. So
yep.
Let's do these real quick emails, these 2 emails. All right. Do you want to read the email from Sam?
I don't have the emails up.
I will read the email from Sam then. Don't worry about it. Here we go. It says, it's a message from Sam, and the subject is, "It's a sad day." Greetings, video game historians. You may be wondering why it's a sad day. That would be because I finally caught up with the podcast, and now I don't have new episodes to listen to while working.
Aw.
You guys should start making 40 episodes a week so I never run out of codex. Just kidding, of course. I am glad to finally be up to date. Going back to your codex, the history of video games, the video game, I think some real consideration is due to have Stephen L. Kent as the final boss. He could quiz you on video game history trivia from throughout the game, and could do some really Metal Gear Solid-esque fourth wall breaking. Ooh. Until next time, Spider Butts, Sam from Maryland. P.S. Great job on the website, Mike. Thank you, Sam.
I like this final boss because it reminds me of the Grunty's Furnace Fun at the end of Banjo-Kazooie, where you, like, before you fight her as like a final boss proper, she quizzes you on trivia from the whole game.
Really?
It's like a game show. Yeah. And so you're like stepping on different things where it'll be like, oh, we're going to play a song. What level's the song from? And it'll be like, here's a picture of like an obscure location. What level's this location from? What's the name of this bad guy? And like, quizzes on Gruntilda, the main boss, her like trivia from her life. When you talk to her sister throughout the castle, her sister will give you, I can't remember, she gives you a buff or something, or she heals you or something. But she also tells you like a weird piece of trivia about Gruntilda and like them growing up as kids. And then those come back in this game show in a way. It's just so funny. I just love it so much.
That's cool. Yeah, let's talk to Steven.
Okay.
Will he do it? He'll do it.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy. All right, I'll just read this other email real quick. It's titled Gears of War. It's from Bowser. Real quick, and I feel bad. Bowser emailed us a while ago, and it got lost in the shuffle. Oh. And I feel horrible, because it should have been on the mailbag episode, because this is a great question, and I'm excited to ask you this. You ready? Hey guys, it's Bowser again. I just re-listened to your Gears of War 1, 2, and 3 episodes again. It's been 2 years now. Any chance of part 2 with Gears Judgment, Gears 4, and maybe Gears of War 5? I mean, that's very possible. We should do that. We played those games together.
We did play those games, yeah. That was 2 years ago? Shoot.
Yeah, I know, right?
Wow.
Also, one more question. Who do you think would win? Halo Reach Team Noble versus Gears of War Delta Squad on a neutral field? Spider Butts, you guys rock.
I think I got to give it to Reach Team.
that's kind of what I'm thinking too, because Noble Team, they're superhuman. They're
Yeah.
cybernetically augmented. Don't get me wrong. Love me some Gears of War. But
Yeah. I think Spartans are just better.
Marcus Phoenix doesn't have a shield. Okay? Nope. He doesn't have plasma weaponry.
Nope.
He doesn't have a Spartan laser.
Nope.
But he does have a chainsaw. On his head
is like a hat, like a bandana or something, right?
He does have a chain. That's true. He does have a lancer.
But do you think that chainsaw is busting through the armor on a Spartan?
Nah, not even with their shields down. Yeah, the Lancer's not going to do anything. Even though I love the Lancer. The Lancer might be one of my new favorite video game weapons. Like,
it's pretty good, yeah.
If I was going to have an imaginary armory full of video game weapons, there would be a rack alone against a wall with a spotlight on it that would have a Lancer on it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. That's a great question. But yeah, I'm going to go with Halo. I'm going to do it. If you disagree with us and you want to go with Delta Squad, Gears of War, and want to tell us why, email us, codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Also, you can join our Discord. If you want to get a link, I can email it to you, or you can go to my Twitter @mecoletta, MECOLETTA. Click on the pinned tweet at the top of my profile. That is a link that never expires. Tyler's on Twitter @SneakerElf, ELPH. You can email him. You can tweet at him. He's there. He's on Twitter. It's fun.
I do. I look at Twitter, even though I don't tweet a lot. I do look at it.
He does look there. And with that, I think that's the episode today. This is a longer one. For sure. Do you want to say, we just got so into that tier list. That's what happened.
I know. I love doing these tier lists. If you like us doing tier lists, let us know on Discord or send us an email or something, because we like doing them. But not if other people don't. So
yeah, I was just like, I was about to start the notes for this episode, and I was like, you know what? I really want to do a tier list again. And I thought the controller, I'm like, this is great. This could be a fun time. So we'll go back to Console Wars next week. And with that, you want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Goodbye, everybody.